First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. So, dealing with the Epstein suicide, of course, the officers are going to be to blame, correct? The officers did not do their 30-minute rounds. If that's the case, I don't know. But there's something else I want to discuss that's kind of being overlooked. And again, it's not to minimize the officer's responsibility. Trust me, if they're not doing their rounds, they should be held responsible, and so should their supervisors, and we'll get to that. But let's not ignore one simple fact, something that is in the background of all this that seems to be just being overlooked. When we come back from our sponsors, I'm going to tell you exactly what that is. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you anytime I post a video. Stand by for our sponsors. When we come back, I'm going to tell you what's being overlooked.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. So earlier today, I got an email from Fox and Friends asking me to go on to discuss the Epstein suicide. More importantly, and more specifically, the officers not doing their tours every 30 minutes, if that's the case. I don't know that yet, but if that's the case. Eventually, as the day progressed, unfortunately, I believe they're pulling away from the segment. But I said, you know what? Let's talk about this a little bit on Tier Talk. Fair enough? Let's get a perspective. I'd rather not automatically jump the gun and say these officers were guilty for not doing their tours. The first question I would ask is, if that's the case and they weren't doing their tours, why not? Let's see what their justification is. And I'll get to the fact later on if they're deciding not to do their tours because they're complacent. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But with that said, we also know that we have an understaffed facility here. One officer mandated 5 times. The other officer just mandated that night. So the first thing I would be looking at is, were we operating within capacity? Were we operating within capacity? And if not, so let's say hypothetically I had an FTE of 30 officers. Were we operating with 30? Or were we operating with 25? And if that's the case, how did I modify and adjust those needed posts, those assignments? Maybe it's not so much the officers didn't do their tours. Maybe it's the fact that they couldn't do their tours because they were assigned elsewhere. Again, maybe. Or maybe we just have staff that didn't do their tours. But it's still worth exploring because we have an understaffed facility. So let's not overlook the fact that we have an understaffed facility with exhausted individuals who may not be capable to do what's expected of them. But again, I'm still not going to minimize the responsibility of doing those tours, especially because if you're not doing those rounds because you say you have these concerns, but you're writing in the logbook that you are doing those rounds, your concerns don't matter anymore because you're lying on a government document, and that's a bigger problem. So again, I'm giving the officers the benefit of the doubt, but I also want the public to know we have an understaffed facility. So even if these officers were at fault and they weren't doing their rounds, we still have another concern we have to address. We have understaffed facilities that aren't properly being staffed. And again, it's right there, present, officer being mandated 5 days in a row, the other officer being mandated that day. So again, not minimizing what they've done if they're not touring, but with that said, let's look at the bigger picture and let's try to really fix what we could on a bigger scale, because this is more than just this facility. This is like a national concern right now. Now, with that said, and I'll keep this part quick, if we do have officers that are complacent and they're not doing their job, then from a higher level, I'm going right to the supervisors. I'm holding the supervisors responsible. It is what it is. The supervisors are in play to make sure that staff is compliant with policy. And if those officers are not doing their rounds, it's going to go from my top down. They're going to feel that effect because that's what has to be done. That's what sets the example. That's what helps us enforce the rules. The supervisors are responsible for their subordinates, and the subordinates are not doing what's expected of them. The supervisors, as well as the subordinates, will be held responsible. Complacency is a deadly enemy, and I entrust my supervisors to make sure that my staff is aware and that they do what's supposed to be done. That's the supervisor's job. Make sure your staff abides by policy and procedure. If you're not doing that, if you're not willing to take responsibility for that, then you should have never became a supervisor. Because if your staff fails to do what needs to be done, you're going to be held accountable. So I'm going to look at you and see what actions you've done to correct that. That's what we do. That's what you're supposed to do. Anything from discipline to retraining, give me something. But this isn't a concern that's just specific to that Manhattan facility. This is a national concern. So, yes, we may have a specific concern with the officers not doing the rounds, but we have a bigger concern about understaffing. Let's not ignore that. So let's bring that out there. Let's get that out there. Let's get that known. And let's see how we can address this in a manner that really could have an impact for this profession. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video.